pretty much everybody calls themselves coach because it's become a hype word kind of thing, but they haven't actually gone through a formal training, or if the training they've gone through has not been enough for them to support people. And so that part needs to be. Most coaches, if you talk to them, they start out because they went through a struggle period in their life. And for me, I went through a period early on in my early 20s where I got into alcohol addiction, drug addiction, depression for a number of years. And that was kind of a point in my life where I was like, you know what, something is off. And I spent about a good decade after that trying to understand, not necessarily from a personal development lens, even though you can call it that. I actually got into philosophy and trying to understand history, trying to understand religion, trying to understand faith, and trying to see like, what the hell am I doing wrong? And as I went through on that journey, it helped me understand a little bit about myself and who I was. And it kind of gave me clues as to where to go. But what ended up happening the first time I got a mentor / coach, who I didn't even consider that, the first time a person really believed and my potential. Up until then, I was doubting so much of myself, but all it took was about, I think, close to 6 months of going through a process to help me dig a little bit deeper into my life, to figure out what my life was about, what mattered to me, where I wanted to go, then completely blew open all the doors. And I did not expect that. So it was about a decade plus of doing it on my own, and about 6 months of working with somebody who was really fully present and didn't have any other motive other than to support me to connect with my potential and what mattered to me. And that was a huge difference. When I saw that, I'm like, holy shit, why don't other people have access? Why didn't I have access to that 30 plus years of my life?
So I have a question. I've had coaches in the past at different phases of my life. And looking back on it, I'm like, I hired a couple of coaches separately that just didn't have enough knowledge or experience in the space that I wanted to be in. And it probably wasn't the best idea, but I was so desperate at the time. I was like, I need this, right? So how do you recommend that people go out and find the right coach for them and vet them to make sure that they don't run into a similar issue that I had?
As you say that, it just reminds me of as for syndicators, we're doing the same thing. We're kind of trying to vet each other. And so it's really about, in my opinion, some of the critical things are, what is their experience? Having that deep conversation of what kind of clients have you worked with and what do you help them achieve? It's that outcome, because that's why we get into coaching, is for an outcome. And so having that conversation with a coach of, well, what outcomes do you provide? What does that look like? And a good coach is going to be able to describe it and explain it, give some examples of other people's outcomes and what it looked like for them. But if the coach isn't able to really verbalize that well, then they probably haven't done a lot of work, which means they're a newer coach, which isn't a horrible thing, but you just got to recognize kind of what you're getting. So that would kind of be my initial thought.
You guys are actually working with our organization. So we have a mentoring program for syndicators, and mentoring to us really means that there's a lot of skills specific to multifamily, and there are full-time syndicators that actually help people do their first deal and scale their portfolios. And that's the purpose of a mentor, someone who's done what you want to do. A coach, though, is a little different. Coach may not necessarily be a multifamily syndicator, but what you guys focus on is mindset. And so what we found is that mindset is so important. But I'd like to know, not everybody in the world is successful doing whatever they want to do. Weight loss or smoking or addictions or real estate investing or syndications. And a lot of people want to do certain things and they want financial freedom or they want this or that, but for some reason they can't do it. And they might even try and give up or think they fail. And I'd be curious, what are some of the things that you're coming across where mindset needs work? Like a few examples of like the top 3 or 4 mindset issues that really hold people back from succeeding.
Yeah, and before that, I want to kind of combine both of the questions from Garrett and Michael, because I think it works very well. So one of the things that we're doing, so our organization, Coaching Mastery Community, our vision is to help kind of take the industry in a positive direction. And it is a big job, but what you find is a lot of people call themselves coaches, but that might not be the case. Everybody has a different idea because the industry is not standardized yet. So we know clearly what a psychologist is. we know what you're going to get when you go into a therapy session generally, because there are some regulations, policies, and stuff around them. Coaching is a completely wide open world. It just has caught people by surprise. A lot like Uber. Nobody knew what the hell Uber was when it came in. Governments stepped in later on to take care of that. But what ends up happening is that pretty much everybody calls themselves coach because it's become a hype word kind of thing, but they haven't actually gone through a formal training, or if the training they've gone through has not been enough for them to support people. And so that part needs to be, that's why whenever my clients come in, one of the first things I ask them, like, have you ever gone through a coaching experience? Can you describe what it is? Almost always they will describe to me sort of a consulting relationship that they've gone through. They've gone on a call, somebody has given them a little bit about, hey, they've trained them a little bit around mindset, and they said, oh, here, do this with it. So they do some training and they give them a challenge to do. That is not what coaching is. And this goes to your second question in a sense, is that a lot of people who don't create success might be stuck in external validation mode. And I want to kind of take people back. Robert Kiyosaki talks about this as well, and coming from real estate investors, that we're basically told how to be. We're conditioned how to be in the world. That might be best for you. So what ends up happening, for example, for an average person growing up in any home, especially in North America, they're taught certain things to do and certain ways to be. And so they grow up thinking that, hey, I'm going to grow up, go to school, after that, go to college, get a degree, and then get a job and do something. And we all know real estate investors find out about 40 years into their life and like, hey, this is not going to give me the payoff I'm looking for.
So
you want to add something?
I wanted to ask, so you touched on this a little bit, but what is the difference between the psychologist and a coach? Because it's like I get what you said. It's like they came onto the scene and they're like, I'm just going to make this up and it's something. But there is real value in coaching, but I guess I don't really know how that would be defined. And I've always been curious about that.
Well, good news and bad news. Good news is I can give you my opinion. The bad news is that there is not a single great answer that everybody agrees on. But I was a licensed psychologist for almost 15 years. I gave it up last year because I'm like, I don't need the license anymore, because I do high performance coaching and these other things. The significant difference, just generally speaking, as a psychologist, when I would meet with people, they would come to me looking for a diagnosis because they had a significant problem. For lack of a better term, they saw themselves as broken. And so they were wanting me to tell them what to do to get fixed. Now, if they didn't want to do what I suggested or what research shows is helpful, then they'd go to medicine, or there would be a combination of both. But it's very problem focused. And in my experience, it was people wanting to become normal. Again, this is my perception and what the work I did. Now, as I did my own personal development as a leader, as a business owner, I grew a private practice. When I was a psychologist, I owned and grew one. And I recognized that I don't want to be normal. I want to be awesome. And so there's a whole different group of people that want to be awesome and that want to have an awesome life, which is why we love working with real estate investors so much, because they want awesomeness, not just to be average or mediocre. And so coaching often, there can be that backwards looking of like when, what happened in your childhood, that's the stereotypical psychologist is tell me about your childhood and how your parents screwed you up. Some of those conversations that happen briefly, but it's always to the benefit of moving forward towards goals, towards a richer life. And so it's much more front and forward facing.
A lot of people want these things. They want a more fulfilled life. They want success. They want certain things, but yet they can't seem to do it. So what are some of the reasons that you find that people are stuck?
Well, as Faisal was starting to talk about, is that we grow up with these frameworks of the way the world works and the way that we work in the world. But that's not always serving us in our actual life. And so it's being able to kind of take a step out the way we've been conditioned and the beliefs we have about the world and evaluate them to see if they're really working for us and if we want to change the beliefs. And so a lot of times what gets people stuck in moving forward is they don't believe they can, or they don't believe that they're worthy of it, or they don't believe, something is getting in the way. if I don't believe that I can fly, I'm probably not going to jump off the roof. So if they don't believe that they can actually have the success, why try? But they're not always conscious of it.
So that's one of them. I think that's really early on. You're absolutely right. If you don't believe something, why would you ever take a step in that direction? Is that really what you're finding for people who just can't get unstuck? Is that really the number one reason?
I would say, for me, in my experience working with a lot of investors, I would say it's a lack of vision. And one of the reasons why I go into vision one of the first things that I do is go into vision with my clients. And I really want to know, why are they doing what they're doing and what is it for? Because a lot of times they will start and jump into an opportunity like real estate investment world. The way they jumped into it because somebody talked about it or somebody said something about it, but they're not actually clear as to how this is going to support them. The only thing they're thinking is, oh, this is going to get me to financial freedom, but they don't actually specifically know why does that really truly matters to them. And usually going deeper into that, they find out a lot of things in there because they want financial freedom because they want a certain quality of life. They want financial freedom because they want to connect better with their spouse, with their kids. They want financial freedom because they want to go towards certain things that they're passionate about. They want financial freedom because they feel like that'll make them feel better in their life. Now, as we explore all this stuff, they find out, holy shoot, there are a lot of things that they can deal with right now while building their financial freedom. So in their mind, if they get the financial freedom, then they will be better off, but they don't work on that stuff. And this is usually a stuck point for a lot of investors too, is that they start, but as soon as they get started, they get distracted with something else because another opportunity comes up because they don't have their vision and their goals are not focused on long-term and they don't know their strategy towards going towards there. So a lot of the stuck points is a huge lack of clarity in there, at least one of the problems.